All right, let's start. So in our today's session, we are going to cover artificial neural network. Let me bring up an Excel file in front of you. That will help me to explain it. Just give me a minute, it's coming up. Okay. So what are we going to cover today is artificial neural network, ANN. So ANN is actually a subset of machine learning. Now in this, what are we trying to do is we are trying to achieve, or we are trying to simulate behavior of human brain. Right? Is this clear, everyone? What are we going to do in ANN? In ANN, we are going, it's actually a subset of machine learning, right? And in what ANN is trying to do is it is trying to simulate the behavior of human being. When human brain thinks in certain ways, right? So we are going to create machine learning programs which works like human brain only. So that is our agenda, or that is the agenda of artificial neural network. So I'm going to walk you through these slides, right? Just focus on this first slide itself. So this is a picture taken in 1956. Any idea what is this picture about? Can you guys please tell me on the chat window? Anyone? Amay, Ashu? Maithili saying camera. What about others? Derek? Okay, so Amay is saying it's a vacuum tube computer. Okay, Maithili has changed her answer to hard disk. Ashu, Derek, what do you think? What is this? Just give us a guess. Okay, so Derek is saying hard disk. Ashu is saying storage. That's right. This is actually a hard drive. Right? This was a hard drive in 1956. Now, any guess what is the capacity of this hard drive? 4 KB. Okay. Two GB. Ashu is saying approximately 1 MB. Derek, just throw me some number here. Derek, you are there? Okay, 5 MB. Cool. So this hard drive capacity is approximately 4 MB. Right, so this was taken way back in 1956, and you can just imagine, just for 4 MB size of data, a hard drive, right? They are hiring a chartered plane to transport this from one location to another location. Right, so this was the situation of hard drive way back in 1956. If you look at the current scenario, right, the hard drive size, physical size, has reduced, and it has reduced so small that we can carry it in our palm. Whereas the capacity of hard drive has also increased a lot, right? And also the cost has decreased. So this 4 MB hard drive way back in 1956 was very, very, very costly. In fact, you can see this is a 10 MB hard drive and it used to cost $3,495 way back in 1980. And in today's world, we can just afford it for like say 200, 300 rupees. We get almost like 256 GB or 512 GB of hard drive space. So the point here I'm trying to make is, as time has progressed, the capacity of hard drive has increased, the physical size of hard drive have decreased, and the cost has also decreased a lot. Similarly, when we talk from computational power point of view, this story is also true. Right? Nowadays, we actually have supercomputers. Right? And the computing power of this supercomputer is very, very high. Right? As compared to the computers that we had almost a couple of decades ago. In fact, we can even afford computers like i7 nowadays, right? So these computers with high processing power like i7 and 3 threads, 5 threads, and 7 threads, and so on, right? They have become a retail computers, like means a regular user can actually afford it. So the cost of computing power has also decreased, and the computing processing speed has increased a lot. So with these two things coming up together, that is high capacity hard drive and high computing power, this has led to the concept of deep learning in realization. So deep learning is not a new concept. It was like an old concept only. All right. So this is not a new concept. It's an old concept. But nowadays it has gained a lot of popularity. And the reason is high capacity hard drive, which we can afford it, right, at a very, very cheap price. At the same time, high computing power. In fact, you can actually rent a supercomputer as well for an hour, for 2 hours, and so on, right? You might have heard about hardware on demand, software on demand, and so on, right? So you can actually rent a supercomputer to do your task. And once the task is complete, you can let that computer go. Right? So as time has progressed, because of these two things, especially the computing power and the hard drive capacity, the implementation of artificial neural network has actually become possible. So the diagram which you see here is called as a deep learning. Don't worry about this. We are going to go in details what deep learning is or what this diagram is trying to tell us as we move ahead. But in order to understand deep learning or artificial neural network properly, right, first we need to understand human brain. Right? At the end of the day, deep learning or artificial neural network, they both are trying to simulate the behavior of human brains, right? So in order to understand this concept correctly or properly, let's just first try to understand our human brain itself. So in this slide, you can see a small microscopic image of human brain. And human brain consists of something called as a neurons. All right, so our human brain is made of neurons. Let's try to take deeper look into the neurons. So your neurons look something like this. And this is an actual image taken way back in 1952. So the image of human brain, not image, the section of human brain was observed under a microscope. And there was a scientist who observed it and then drew what neuron is going to look like. So in this, you can see it looks like a root structure, right? Tree root structure. It's just that the roots are over here. Then there are some long wires and there is a concentrated area over here and similarly over here. And you can also see the roots of one neuron is actually getting mixed with the roots of another neuron. On further enlarging this under the electronic microscope, the structure looks like this. So this is a human brain cell called as a neuron. Now a neuron in human brain consists of three things. One, this root-like structure, which is called as a dendrites. Then another, a long structure over here, which is called as an axon. And one is a center part, which is called as a neuron itself. Right? So our human brain are made up of billions and billions of neurons, not just one neuron, but they are made up of billion neurons. And each neuron looks like this. Is this clear, guys? Can you please confirm it on the chat window? Perfect. Now let us try to understand what these individual parts are trying to do. So your neuron, which is a central part, is actually responsible for taking the decisions. And when it takes a decision, it passes that message with the help of the axon to other neurons. And the dendrites of one neuron is actually intertwined with the dendrites of another neuron. You can clearly see over here, right, in the first image. So these two neurons, these are the axons. These are the dendrites of one neuron. These are the dendrites of another neurons, and they are getting connected with each other. So whenever a neuron A takes a decision, it will send a message with the help of the axon, and then on the dendrites. Then from here, the message gets passed from one neuron to another neuron. On further exploring this, right, scientists actually realized there is no physical connection between two neurons. All right. So dendrites of one neuron, it doesn't get physically connected with the dendrites of another neuron. So there is a gap here. And this gap is called as a synapses. So now if there is a gap, then how these two neurons are communicating with each other? And they found out they are communicating with the help of something called as electrical impulses. All right. So how two neurons communicate with each other? They communicate with the help of electrical impulses. Now this electrical impulse have different intensity. Few of the electrical impulse based on certain situation will have a bigger intensity, and few of the electrical impulses based on the same condition might have different intensity. Is this clear? Can you guys please confirm it on the chat window? Perfect. Now, after realizing like how human brains are working, right? So they work with something called as a neurons. They send some electrical impulses from their neuron via the axon, and with the help of the dendrites, right? Another neuron receives that electrical impulses and it reacts according to that impulse. So this thing was borrowed into the computer world, and this is the neuron in computer world. So here neuron is this central circle over here. This x1, x2, x3, x4 till xn, these are nothing but dendrites which serve as an input to these neurons, right? And the output of neuron is over here y. Again, there can be here multiple dendrites, right? And so on. So in computer world, the neuron structure looks like this. And this is just one single neuron, right? And again, in human brain, they are made up of billions and billions of neurons. So the idea here is we will try to simulate, or we'll try to use a similar structure, and finally we get a structure which looks like this. So each of these green circles are nothing but neurons. Here the yellow circles, they are nothing but the inputs. And here the red circle is nothing but the output. So this green circle is sending its output to the next neuron. So for this next neuron, this line serves as an input, whereas for the neuron over here, this line serves as an output. So the output of one neuron is transferred as an input to the next neuron. Similarly, for this neuron, the output of this neuron is transferred as an input to the following neuron. So what we can see here is a sequential layer, right? Is this clear, guys? Can you please confirm this on the chat window? Perfect, right? So what we can see here is a sequential layer. So from computer point of view, right, we call this first layer, which is a yellow color circles, as an input layer. We consider this last layer, which is a red circle, as an output layer. So this will indicate our final output. And the layer which is in between input and output layer is called as a hidden layer. And there can be multiple layers inside the hidden layer. You can have one hidden layer, you can have two layers inside the hidden layer, you can have three layers inside the hidden layer, and so on. And also observe, output of previous layer goes to each and every neuron of the next layer. Same thing is happening here. The output of this layer, this neuron, is going to the input going as an input to each and every neuron in the next layer. Right? So we get this mesh-like structure, which is similar to our human brains. Is this clear? Can you guys please confirm it on the chat window? What about Derek? Perfect. Okay. Now let's take a further look into this neuron. So here, the central layer, which is a neuron, right? It is actually one complicated mathematical function. Is this clear? Right? So this layer over here, it's actually a complicated mathematical function. Just give me a second, guys. Sorry, let's continue. And this mathematical function, it considers each and every inputs. Right? So you can clearly see the function here is represented as function of addition of all the inputs, right? And each and every input had some weightages. So if you remember how the neurons are communicating, they're communicating with these electrical impulses, right? And I told you that the intensity of electrical impulses are different, right? Here, the intensity of this electrical impulse will be different. At this point, the intensity of the electrical impulse will be different. Similarly, at this point, the intensity of electrical impulse is going to be different. So this intensity of electrical impulse is indicated as weights, W1, W2, W3 till Wn, right? And the neuron which is going to receive the electrical impulses from different neurons, he is going to consider all of them, right? And how? By doing the summation of weightages into the input value, weightages into the input values, weightages into the input value. What are these input values? These are again electrical impulse number, right? And what is the weightage? Among all of this one is having W1 weight. Among all of this one is having W2 weight. So this weightages helps to decide the priority of this inputs values that we are going to give, right? So it is weighted, you can say kind of a weighted average formula here, right? So the neuron is nothing but addition of all the input values multiplied by their weightages, right? And then that is multiplied by with some mathematical function. And the final output is treated as an output of this neuron. Is this clear, guys? Perfect. So this function is called as an activation function. All right. So the function over here is called as what? Activation function. And there are various activation functions available in the market. To name few of them, these are 4 activation functions which are very, very popular. So we have an activation function called as a threshold function. We have an activation function called as a sigmoidal function. We have an activation function called as a rectifier function. We have an activation function called as a hyperbolic tangential function. So the functions, right, over here is called as an activation function. And different activation functions available are threshold, sigmoidal, rectifier, hyperbolic, etc. These 4 are heavily used. What threshold function is trying to tell us is, after a certain intensity of input, the output of that neuron is going to be 1. Right? So you can see here, after certain input value X, immediately the output will be 1. So here the output of this neuron is either going to be 0 or 1 if we are using threshold function. Is this clear, guys? If we are using a threshold function, threshold activation function, the output is going to be either 0 or 1. And what threshold function is trying to tell us, that after a particular value, the output will immediately go from 0 to 1. Can you guys please confirm this in the chat window? Perfect. Let's take a look at the different activation function now. Let's take example of sigmoidal. So what sigmoidal function is trying to tell us is, here after a certain value of X, right, there will be change from 0 to 1 in a sigmoidal manner. Here you can see there's an immediate jump, but here it's not going to be an immediate jump. It is going to be in the sigmoidal fashion. So this S-like structure, right, is called as a sigmoidal. Is this clear, guys? Perfect. If you remember our SVM, support vector machines, right? Using SVM, we did classification and we also did regression, right? And in SVM, we have one kernel function, which was sigmoidal, right? And even over there, the change was in this S-like structure only. So similarly, we have an activation function here called as a sigmoidal function. Is this clear? Requesting everyone to please confirm. Perfect. Now, another type of activation function is called as a rectifier function. Again, rectifier function is similar to the threshold or sigmoidal, right? You can see here, it is changing the values from 0 to 1. But what it does is, after a certain time, it tries to rectify the value. So the change is not sudden as like threshold, right? At the same time, it is not slow as like sigmoidal, right? It is going to rectify it. Say, for example, let's say we are doing a betting, right? Let's say we are doing a betting on, say, IPL, right? And let's say Chennai Super King is playing as first innings and last 2 overs are left, right? And let's say we have said that the final score, right? The final score of Chennai Super Kings will be something around, let's say, 201, given the fact that MS Dhoni is playing. All right. But let's say in the next over or in the next ball, immediately MS Dhoni gets out. Then what we will do is, we will try to rectify our output. We will now say, nee, now 201 is not possible. It will be somewhere around, say, 180. Right? So we are trying to change our output based on the certain conditions here. Right? And this is what we do in the rectifier function. Right? And the way we are changing it over here is not as drastic as threshold, as well as not as something similar to in sigmoidal. It will be in a rectifier manner. Is this clear, guys? Perfect. And another kind of activation function we have is hyperbolic tangential. Now, in case of hyperbolic tangential, your output ranges from -1 to 1, right? And it is in this structure. So initially it is -1, then it goes to 0, and then it goes to 1. So here you can see we have mentioned the definition of functions as well. So function of x is equal to 1 if x is greater than equal to 0, or it will be 0 if x is less than 0. Like I said earlier, right? After a certain point of x, immediately there will be a change. In case of sigmoidal, function of x is equal to 1 divided by 1 plus e to power of minus x. So in this manner, there will be a change. In case of rectifier function, the function is function of x is equal to maximum of x comma 0. Right? And in case of hyperbolic tangential, the function is given as function of x is equal to 1 minus e to power minus 2x divided by 1 plus e to power minus 2x. Now these are mathematical functions. We are not going to go deep inside this. The only thing that we are trying to understand here is if there is a situation where we are trying to predict 0 or 1, right? And we are not interested in any of the values which are in between, then I'll be using threshold function. If there is a situation where I want to predict values between 0 and 1 as terms of probability, 0 probability and 1 is the highest probability, right? And there can be probabilities like 30%, 20%, 10%, 70%, and so on. That case, I'll be the best thing I'll be going to use is either sigmoidal or rectifier. Now, among all of these four, I have seen that rectifier is heavily used, especially in the convolution neural network. Right? So convolution neural network, rectifier is heavily used. Is this clear, guys? Perfect. Let's move on. Okay, just a small quiz type question. Can you guys tell me what will be the answer here? So Derek and Maithili has set threshold. What about Amay, Ashu? Amay, Ashu, you there? Okay, so Amay has saying threshold. What about, sorry. Yeah, perfect. I got the response from both. That's right. In this situation, the best answer would have been threshold. But we can actually also use sigmoidal and we can also use rectifier with small modification. What we can say in sigmoidal, let's say is if the output, let's say, is in between 0 to 0.3, right? So we are saying if it is between 0 to 30%, then consider it as 0. Above 30%, consider it as 1. So we can use such kind of situation, and using that, we can also try to use rectifier and sigmoidal function in this. Is this clear, guys? How we can use rectifier and the sigmoidal function? Perfect. So you can see here, the same example is pointed out over here. So assuming that our dependent variable, that is y, is binary, which is either 0 or 1. If I use a threshold function, then output y is going to be function of addition of all the weightages and x1. Yes, Ashu, that's right. We cannot use hyperbolic because it also gives values from between -1 and 0. And the same example, if we happen to use sigmoidal, then our equation will look like this. Let's move on. So this is another example how we can use artificial neural networks. So these are our input values, right, which acts as an input layer. And in this case, in this one hidden layer, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have overall 4 neurons. And then we have final neuron, which is acting as an output neuron, output layer. Now in this hidden layer, we are using activation function as rectifier. So all of these 4 neurons is going to use activation function called as the rectifier only, right? And in the next neuron, which is actually indicating the final output, here we are using sigmoidal function. So the point here I'm trying to make you realize is, within a given layer, there will always going to be one activation functions. Across the layers, we can use different activation functions. Is this clear? Can you guys please confirm this on the chat window? Perfect. Right? Now let's try to address this example. So in this example, we are trying to see how the neural network is going to work. Let's say I want to predict the price of a flat or a bungalow or particular area, right? Let's stick to the example of predicting the price of a flat. Now the price of the flat depends on multiple inputs. First of all, it depends on the area. Then it also depends on the number of bedrooms. It depends how far it is from the main city, right? Similarly, it depends on how old that property is. Do you guys agree with me on this point? Perfect. So what is going to happen is, let's say there is an area in Kharghar, which is say 1300 square feet, right? And the number of bedrooms here are, let's say 2. And say distance from proper Mumbai city, it's approximately 30 kilometers. I'm just making this number up. And that property is say 4 years old. Similarly, there is another property in Kharghar, which is, let's say, again 1400 square feet. And the number of bedrooms are, let's say, 1. And it is, let's say, 10 years old. And distance, again, let's say it's now 35 kilometers, right? And yeah, that's all. Now, based on these inputs, each neuron is going to react differently. Like you can clearly see in this diagram, right? Based on the area, only the first neuron and the second neuron is reacting, right? We have purposely not drawn here a line which goes from X1 to the second neuron, is because this is trying to tell us that this intensity is very, very low, right? So the actual neurons which are going to react based on the area are just this 2, 1, 2. Similarly, based on the bedrooms, only this particular neuron is getting reacted, where others don't care about that input. So the intensity of this neuron, or you can say weightage, right? Weightage of this value on this neuron are very, very less, except for this one. So if you recollect this diagram, right, we have different weightages, W1, W2, W3, W4, right? So if this weight, let's say it's 0.0001, what does that mean? This particular neuron doesn't care about this area, right? Similarly over here, age is going to react with neuron number 3 and neuron number 5, whereas neuron 1, 2, and 4 doesn't care about that input. And when we put this all together, we get a final structure which looks like this, right? And based on this, now you will have a final output in terms of price. So again, the point here I'm trying to make you realize is each neuron, right, based on the intensity, that is based on the weightages, will react differently. Is this clear? And this what actually happens with human brain as well, right? So even in human brains, let's say if you're trying to touch a hot particle, there will be certain neurons which will react, not all the neurons, right? There are going to be certain neurons which will react immediately for that particular situation, that is, we are touching a hot particle. If I touch the hot particle again the same neurons will only react. Other neurons will not react, right? The initial neurons which reacted to that particular behavior, right? Touching a hot particle, the same neurons is going to react again and again and again whenever that incident happens. So here, whenever we give an area input, these two neurons will react immediately, whereas this neuron will not react. Same thing, based on the number of bedrooms, only this neuron will react immediately, whereas other neurons will not react. So there is some kind of a pattern that is happening in our brain or getting registered in our brain. Similarly, if you touch, say, cold particle, some other set of neurons will get react, and they will always react whenever you touch cold particle. Right? So same thing happens with our artificial neural network as well. Right? And which one is going to react? That actually depends on the weightages and the activation functions. Is this clear? Requesting everyone to please confirm. Perfect. So this is how neural network works, not how neural network learns. Right? So this slide indicates how neural network works. It works on the intensity, that is your weightages, and the value. It sums up all of them, and based on the activation function, it will choose to react it or it will choose not to react. Now let's take a look how neural network learns. So in order to understand how neural network learns, right, we'll take this example. Or just a short answer, how neural network learns. So neural network learns with a technique called as back propagation. All right. So let's take this example. So here, let's say I'm trying to take the help of artificial neural network to predict the outcome of an exam based on number of study a particular student is doing, number of hours he's sleeping before the examination, or let's say every day, and the total percentage that he has received in the earlier quizzes. So based on these three input values, I want to predict how much he's going to get in the final exam. Right? So each of them, in the beginning, they have same weightages. So we'll consider equal weightages to all of them. We give this 12 as an input with some weightage to this neuron. Then we give 6 as an input with the weightage to this neuron. We give 78% as the input to this with the weightage to this neuron. And this neuron will use one of the activation functions. It can either use sigmoidal, threshold, rectifier, and so on based on this situation, right? So in this case, let's say we use rectifier function. And based on this neuron has reacted and it has predicted an output called as y cap. All right. Now, let's say the exam is tomorrow. This artificial neural network has predicted that a student 1 will get an output of say 93%. Now, tomorrow comes, the student gives the exam, and let's say unfortunately instead of 93%, he has received, let's say, 70%. Right? So 70% was the original value. Now the difference here, 70 and with the 93, is called as an error. Right? So the typical error function which we use is this: difference square divided by 2 is the typical error function used in most of the algorithms. Right? So this is going to be some number. Right? Like in our case, let's say, let me bring up a calculator. So 93 minus 70. Sorry, let me clear this. 93 minus 70 is 23. 23 into 23 is 529 divided by 2. So we got an error of 264.5. Now we are going to distribute this error back by adjusting the weights. So what our goal is to reduce this number. So the number which we got 264.5, right? We are going to try to minimize this. And how will be minimizing this? By distributing this 264.5 back to the neuron. Neuron will distribute this back to these weightages, right? So initially each of them were having weightages, equal weightages. So now these weightages will get changed. Let's say this will say 0.30, 0.3. This will become, let's say 0.2, and this will become say 0.5, right? So we are adjusting these weightages now. In the beginning, we gave them equal weightages, let's say 0.33, 0.33, 0.33. And now we are changing them, right, by 0.3, 0.2, and 0.5, right? Now using these new weightages, again, we'll recalculate the output y, that is y cap. And again, we'll take the difference with the original value and we'll check. If the difference is again huge, again we will back propagate that error, and again the new weightages will be adjusted, right? Once the weightages are adjusted, again we'll calculate y cap, and we'll keep on doing this again and again and again. And finally, once we get this a small c value, so we say now your neural network has trained properly in order to predict the exam result based on input study hours, sleep hours, and quizzes. Is this clear, guys? Can you please confirm on the chat window? Yes, C is called as a cost function. Or you can also say error function that we are trying to reduce. Perfect. So in this example, I was telling you that we are modifying the weights immediately. But few of them might also decide to modify the weights after processing all the rows, right? So what in this case, what will happen? We'll take the first student based on study, hours, quiz, it will do prediction. So let's say this is the prediction y cap here. Then we took the second and we didn't adjust the weight immediately. Now using the same weightage, we are trying to predict the output of second student. Using the same weightages, we are trying to predict the outcome of third student, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth. And once everything is done, we just adds up all of these y caps. And then we'll try to adjust the weights based on this final cost function. Right? So here the cost function is summation of difference of predicted minus the actual square divided by 2 for all the rows. So either you can choose to update it immediately, like in this case, like for each row we'll be adjusting the weights, or you can choose after one epoch. So here when I travel from 1 to 8, so let's say there are only 8 rows, right, in the learning data set. When I travel, it becomes as one epoch. Is this clear? Requesting everyone to please confirm. Perfect. Okay, so this is fine. Now question is how to reduce this cost function immediately, right? So we said that we'll go and modify the weights, but let's say if I do, or if I try all the values, let's say the weight values can only range between say 0 to 10, right? And if I try all the different combinations, that is going to take a lot of time, right? So what are the different ways of reducing this cost function immediately? So the technique which is used to reduce this cost function immediately is called as a gradient descent, right? So this is a minimization problem, right? And gradient descent is one of the technique for here. And it is actually a best technique. So with this technique, we can actually come up with the answer very quickly. So you can see here what we are doing is for different values of weightages, right? So for different combination of these weightages, we have simply plotted a graph, right? And looks like in this case, the graph seems like a parabolic function. And again, given the fact that cost function is half of y minus y cap minus y the whole square, right, which is similar to your parabola, the output of different cost values, if you plot it in a graph or different values of weightages, it will give you a parabolic result. And this is the best one, right? So this combination here, whatever the combination we have of weightages at this point, right, is always giving us the best result. So we want to reach at this point. How to do that? Let's say I try all possibilities, right? If you try all possibilities, and let's say if we use a supercomputer in order to do that, all combinations. So for example, we have a supercomputer called as the Sunway Thyolite, and it was the fastest computer. I think that was in 2016 or 17. Now there's some other computer which is much faster than Sunway Thyolite. It's actually a Chinese computer, right? Supercomputer. So let's say we use this, and the speed of this computer is 93 petaflops, right? So we measure the speed in terms of clock speed, right? So our computer speed is indicated in terms of clock speed. And how is that? That is by saying how many cycles it needs to complete one floating point operation, right? So based on that, we actually decide the computer speed. So this Sunway Thyolite is actually capable of doing, say, 93 petaflops every second. All right. So this is its capacity. Now in this example, right, we have overall how many neurons? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this one is the 6. Each neuron is going to receive inputs 1, 2, 3, 4. So this neuron receives 4. This neuron receives 4. This neuron receives 4. This neuron receives 4. And this neuron also receives 4. So 4 5s are 20. 20 weightages here. And each of this neuron is sending its output to the next neuron, which is an output neuron Y. So here again, we have another 5 weightages. So overall, we have 25 weights. So let's say an error comes. First, we'll distribute it across this 5. And then this will distribute it across this 4. Similarly, the error which is received by here, by this neuron, will get distributed to this 4 neuron, and so on. And we are going to try all different possibilities, right? So the different possibilities here, right? And again, here we are assuming that weightages can range here between, let's say, 1,000, right? So the different possibility here comes out to be 10 to power 75 combinations, right? So these are the possibilities. Now, if I'm hiring this supercomputer, Sunway Thyolite, which is speed is 93 petaflops, right? We can see that the supercomputer itself will take 3.42 into 10 to power 50 years. Now, this is a very, very, very long time, right? Do you guys agree with me on this point? Can you please confirm it on the screen? Okay, so just for here, in order to identify what is the best answer, right, to reach at this point, it will take 10 to power 50 years if we are using all, if we're trying to find out all possible combinations with the help of supercomputer. So now how to reach it in much quicker manner, right? So how to reach this in much quicker manner? That is with the help of gradient descent. What gradient descent is saying, let's say, and again, I'm just giving you a small overview of gradient descent here, right? So what gradient descent is saying, take a ball here and leave it. Now, as soon as you leave a ball, right, it will go down because of the inertia. And it will continue to go up, right, because of the momentum, right? And at this point, it stops. And from here, again, it rolls back. And again, it goes down and so on. And after a few iterations, it will settle down at the best point. Do you agree with me on this point? Requesting everyone to please confirm. What are those others? Ashu, Derek, Maithili? Derek? Derek, are you there? Okay, not sure. Let's continue. I'll take that as yes. Perfect. So here, using this technique, we can immediately come up to this answer, right? So you can actually see we are actually skipping a lot of things. From here, ball averaged here. From here, ball averaged here. From here, ball averaged here. And that becomes my final answer. Right? So a number of iterations, 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you recollect way back in our school days, we used to have mathematical problems like calculate the value of pi up to 3 decimal points using approximation techniques in Newton-Raphson method. Do you guys remember this? This was, I think, in 10th standard. Right? We used to have approximation technique, right, to find a particular value of pi using Newton-Raphson and so on. Even over there, we were not trying all the possible values, right? We were using some approximate values, and based on that, we were finding out the answer. So using the similar approach, gradient descent is going to calculate this. Right? It is also kind of an approximation technique, you can say. Is this clear? Perfect. Now let's consider if the error function, right, instead of using this, if you have used some other error function, and that error function when plotted on graph, different values of graph was looking something like this. Right? And again, let's say if I try to use the same gradient function technique, I'll take a ball here, I'll release it. It comes here, goes here, it goes back here, it comes here, and it settles down. Right? So according to this, the best value is going to be this combination. Right? But looking at the graph, we know that this is not the correct answer, right? This is not the best answer. The best answer should have been over here. So this is a drawback of your gradient descent. In order to avoid that, we use a technique called as stochastic gradient descent. Is this clear? Now what stochastic gradient descent is going to do is, we can understand with this example. So when we are updating the weights after one complete epoch of the data set, that is a batch gradient descent, right? And when we update the weight after each and every value, that becomes a stochastic gradient descent. Is this clear, guys? Yeah. Actually, what about Ashu, Derek? Perfect. So with this, we reach to the final slide, which indicates the algorithm for artificial neural network. What this algorithm is saying, at the beginning, randomly initialize the weights to a small number which is close to 0 but not 0. So all the weightages which we have here, right, we'll randomly initialize them to some number. You can give same value to all of them, or you can give random numbers as well. It's your choice, right? But most probably we choose random numbers. Now we give the input, or we input the first observation of our data set in the input layer. So now this x1, x2, x3, they are nothing but individual columns. So study will be x1, sleeping hours will be x2, quiz will be x3, right? So for the first row, we are going to put all of these values inside x1, x2, x3 in the input layer. And here you can see each feature is one input node, right? So each neuron or each yellow circles here is your one column. All right, is this clear? Derek, can you please confirm this? Perfect. Now in the third step, we propagate these values. So what will happen now? 12 will get multiplied with the weightage of W1. Similarly, 6 will get multiplied with weightage of W2. and 78% will get multiplied with the weightage of W3. And this addition will pass to the function, and based on the function, so we'll have some value. Let's say if we are using a rectifier function, so we'll be using this max of x comma 0, and based on that we'll have an output y, right? So this process where we are propagating the data from right to left, sorry, from left to right, that is forward propagation. Once the forward propagation is completed, we get the predicted result y. We compare the predicted result with the actual result at the step 4. So step 4, you can see it's compare the predicted result to the actual result, and we get an error, right? And we use cost function. After getting a cost function, we'll get a value which will try to propagate it back towards the output to input by adjusting the weightages. So that becomes back propagation. And this is where your stochastic gradient descent or gradient descent technique kicks in. They will help us to adjust the weightages. With the new weightage, we will repeat step 1 to 5. And we keep on doing this again and again and again till we get a good result. So you can see here, if we are repeating the step 1 to 5, after each observation, it is also a part of reinforcement learning. So this becomes artificial neural network, which is doing a reinforcement learning. And when we do step 1 to 5, after a particular batch, we can say it's a batch learning. Right? What is reinforcement learning? I think we haven't covered that, but just for your information, reinforcement learning is called as continuous learning. With our current decision will always based on our past experience. Right? So the new decision is always based on the past experience. That is nothing but reinforcement learning. So if we are updating the weightages after every output y cap, right? So that can also be considered as reinforcement learning, but this is reinforcement learning with artificial neural network. And then finally, once we get a good output, we stop training the process. And then our artificial neural network is ready and we can use it for prediction. Is this clear, guys? Requesting everyone to please confirm. Perfect. So this is the theory of our artificial neural network. Now, in order to write the code for artificial neural network, we are going to depend on few new libraries. So far we have been using sklearn, right? Can you guys please confirm? So up till now, we have been using sklearn libraries, right? We have used sklearn pre-processing. We have used sklearn linear model, like linear regression. We have used sklearn ensemble techniques like sklearn.cluster, right? Sorry, sklearn.decision classifications and so on. But for artificial neural network, we depend on a library called as Keras. Is this clear, guys? What is the library name? It is Keras. And your Keras library depends on another library called as TensorFlow. So it actually works with TensorFlow as well as with Theano. Right? So there are these two libraries, TensorFlow and Theano. Most popular combination of Keras is with the TensorFlow, and we are going to use the same combination. So we are going to use Keras library with TensorFlow library. Is this clear, guys? Good. So we need to first install them. Right? We need to install this library. So what you can do is you can open your Anaconda Navigator, right, and go to the environment. So in my case, I have created a separate environment called ANN, right? So this has all the things related to artificial neural network, right? So you can either create a separate environment called ANN, or you can actually continue to use your base environment. Is your choice. My suggestion is better you create a new environment. Now, and how to create the environment? You can simply click on this create button. You can use a name, let's say artificial neural network TensorFlow, right? You can choose your Python version package, right? And click on create. As soon as you click on create, this will take certain time, right? And it needs internet as well in order to install the packages related to the Python. Please note, when you create an environment, it only installs the package of Python. It is not going to install the package of your machine learning. Even sklearn will not be installed in your system. Like as you can clearly see in this case, right? In my ANN, install libraries, right? Or you can say leaf detection. This is my another environment. Just give me a minute, it's coming up. These are the list of libraries which are installed, right? So what you can do is you can create an environment. After creating an environment, let's say I'm going to this ANN environment again, right? Back to ANN environment. And from the drop down here, instead of install, I will select not installed. And here I will search for packages. Let's say I'll start with first scientific Kit-learn library. Right, so you can clearly see sklearn is not installed on ANN environment. So I will install it by clicking on this. You can choose a version, right? So right now you can say it will install 0.23 version. If you want a different version, what I did was I simply right click this. I went for marks for a specific version installation, and you can choose a specific version. Right, so you can choose this. Once sklearn library is installed, then you will install other libraries like pandas, similar fashion. After pandas, you can also install NumPy. Right? Just make a note of this. So the libraries which are installing are sklearn, pandas, NumPy. And again, a small suggestion, first install this auxiliary libraries like pandas and NumPy, and then you install sklearn. Right? So let's say in this case, I'll show you a small demo how to install pandas library. So I'll simply click on this. Right? After clicking on this, I will click on this apply button, which is at the right corner. Now, this will try to get all the other dependent libraries here, and it will give you a list. Once the list is ready, this button, apply button, will get activated. Just click on this and it will start installing the libraries for you. So how to create the environment? So Maithili, if you see your left corner, we have a create button. Right? Just click on this create button. It will give you a window. Make sure you select Python package and you select the Python environment. And I'll suggest you to use, in this case, use Python 3.6. Right? Please use Python 3.6 instead of Python 3.7. You'll get that in the dropdown itself. Let me show it to you. Let me cancel this. So create, just give a name, ANN with TensorFlow. I'm selecting Python. I'm selecting 3.6. Click on create. Sorry, I accidentally clicked on cancel. My bad. Right, so now it will, and it needs internet, right? So it is creating a new environment. At the same time, it is installing Python 3.6 version in this particular environment. Once that is done, then you can install these libraries. Right, so first you will be installing pandas, followed by NumPy, followed by scientific kit. So please type SCIKIT learn, right? Don't type sklearn. Once these three libraries are installed, then you can search for TensorFlow. And after installing TensorFlow, you can install Keras. Is this clear, guys? So this is your small homework, right? You're going to install these libraries. Okay. Perfect. Just wait for a moment. This is almost done. Then we'll quickly verify how to ensure that libraries are installed properly. It will see that step as well. Thanks, Maithili. Happy Teachers Day to everyone. Okay, so you can see now the environment is created, right? I'll quickly go to the installed against this. You will see here all install packages. Now, unfortunately, not showing me anything. Maybe I'll see it in updatable, or it will take a little time to come up. Right, so let's go back to our ANN. Oh, no. Let's go to this TensorFlow environment. So I have all the packages installed there properly. So I'll click on this TensorFlow environment and I'll bring that up. Done. Against the installed packages, this is interesting. I think something is wrong with my Anaconda Navigator. I think I'll have to update this. But what you'll realize is once you install the package, under the install package, if you, okay, I know what happened. My bad. So here pandas was already selected. So let me go back to the TensorFlow and I have removed this search package. And now you will see all the install package on this particular environment. Right? And here I'll now search for Keras. Please make a note of the version. It's 2.2.2. So you all guys are going to install Keras version 2.2.2. Right? Similarly for TensorFlow, and also install these others as well. Keras application. Let me make a note of this. Keras applications version is 1.0.4. Keras base 2.2.2 and Keras pre-processing. Please make sure you use the same version, guys. Otherwise, there will going to be a problem with your program. Because with the new libraries, they have changed some small syntax. Right, so we'll be using Keras 2.2.2, Keras application 1.0.4, Keras base 2.2.2, and Keras preprocessing 1.0.2. Similarly, for TensorFlow, you will be using 1.9.0. And again, here there is a dependency, right? You need to install TensorFlow first. And after installing TensorFlow, then install Keras. Is this clear, guys? Perfect. Now see, I'm sticking to this TensorFlow environment and I'm going to click on this home button. And from here, I'm going to launch the spider. It's here, you can see here, it says application on TensorFlow. So what this is doing is, it is launching the spider environment with TensorFlow environment settings. Right, so now if you run this program, it will use Python 3.6, it will use Keras 2.2.2, and it will use TensorFlow 1.9.0, and so on. Is this clear, guys? Of, let's wait for a few minutes. Spider is coming up. Good. And now you can go to the console. So if everything is installed properly, that is your TensorFlow and your Keras, under the console, just type import TensorFlow. And if this import statement works properly without giving any errors, so this is an indication that TensorFlow environment is properly set up on your system. Is this step clear? Similarly, you are going to type after TensorFlow, you will type import Keras. Right? So these are some small verification steps which make sure that your environment is up and running. So you can see I didn't got any error here, which means TensorFlow environment is properly installed on this environment. Similarly, I'll type here import Keras. And you can see as soon as I do import Keras, it says it is going to use TensorFlow behind the scene. Right? I already told you Keras works with two environments. It can either, sorry, it works with two libraries. Either it can work with TensorFlow or Theano. Right? But the most of the time we always use TensorFlow with Keras. And that's why it's mandatory for us to install TensorFlow first before the Keras library. Any doubts till this point, guys? Perfect. So with this, we'll stop here. There's just a small assignment. Okay, so each library has its own set of algorithms. Right? So let's say, for example, if you're using TensorFlow, in fact, your TensorFlow also have decision tree algorithm. It also have random forest algorithm, right? It also have linear regression algorithms and so on. But what TensorFlow is doing, the way it works. So TensorFlow works on the principle of graph. For example, let's say I'm giving you one example here, a very basic example here. Let's say I want to do calculation of, I have two numbers, say I have two numbers, 5 and I have number say 7, right? And I want to do calculation of say multiplication. I want to do say division. So let's say this is X and this is Y, right? I want to do multiplication, division, I want to do addition, I want to do square and so on, right? So if I'm using a regular library, what will happen is it will take this value X, it will do the multiplication X into Y, then it will do X, X divided by Y, then it will do X plus Y, and then it will do X into X, right? So these are the different ways you will get an output. But what TensorFlow does is it creates a graph here. So you'll have your graph. Okay. So this is say X This is say y. This graph here will indicate x into y. This will say x divided by y. This will say x plus y. And this will say x into x. Right? And so x goes here. Similarly, this graph will take y from here. Right? Same thing. Similarly here as well. Right? And we are giving now input x as 5 and we'll input x, y as 7. So now what TensorFlow library will do, it will pre-calculate all these values. So even before you actually do this program, this graph will get created when you try to compile or do this, right? And it has this graph, and using this graph, it realized these steps can be processed parallelly. So it will execute all of these things parallelly, and it will give you the values immediately. In fact, if there is a situation which, let's say, x into y plus 20, I'm just plus 2. So already there is an x plus y. So it is not going to calculate x plus y again. So it does this in this fashion. So you can realize, right? It speeds up your operation. It speeds up the execution of your program drastically. So TensorFlow is library based on this concept, graph based. Whereas sklearn, it's not based on this. It follows our regular approach. So what libraries does is the way libraries are implemented based on that we either get a good, optimizations. Does that make sense, Maithili? Perfect. All right, then we'll stop here, right? We'll resume once again on next Saturday. Next Saturday, we'll try to have a little longer session. We'll have almost like 2.5 hour session. And on that session, we'll try to cover our first artificial neural network program. And we'll also try to cover the theory of convolution neural network. All right, then, thanks everyone. Please make sure that before you come to next session, you have all of the softwares installed properly on your system, right? You have TensorFlow and Keras working properly. And also make sure the version, right? Please make sure you are using the right version. Right, I have already pinged you the versions over here. So please just copy those and make a note of them. Just trying to find out the version. So once you have noted down the version, please reply done on the chat window, and then we'll close for the day. Thanks, Maithili. What about others? Amay, Ashu, Derek? Perfect. What about Amay, Ashu? Perfect. All right, then. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining. We'll meet again next week.